Allen Lund Company wishes all the owner-operators out there a Happy New Year. OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
Truckers have a rare opportunity right now, a chance to make significant progress regarding a topic that has many drivers red in the face and that's been a thorn in their side for years now, the issue of broker transparency. OOIDA recently held an event to educate truckers on the topic. First, Scott Thompson will bring you some of what was said at that event. Then I'll discuss that and the proposed rule itself with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. A new year can sometimes bring new mental health challenges. We speak with therapist Buck Black about some tips and tricks he has to make sure you're in a good state of mind. And finally, truckers across the nation have been affected by predatory towing practices, with some bills big enough to put small business truckers out of business. Scott will cover that and more with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association is circling the wagons for a new rule on broker transparency. Following a call to action for its roughly 150,000 members, the association held a fireside chat on Wednesday evening, led by OOIDA President Todd Spencer and Executive Vice President Louis Pugh.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fireside chat here at OOIDA.
In November, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration introduced a proposal that would improve transparency in the broker-carrier model. Some of the provisions include requiring brokers to keep their records in an electronic format and providing those records within 48 hours of a carrier asking for them. It is not a perfect proposal. Jay Grimes, OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, also took part in Wednesday's fireside chat and said FMCSA doesn't mention how they're going to improve enforcement and impose penalties on bad actors.
They are relying on the current civil penalties that are already approved in federal motor carrier safety regulations. And frankly, they don't provide enough of a strategy exactly on how they're going to improve enforcement. And we've got a couple ideas that we're going to throw out there in our comments because that's really going to be the key if and when this rulemaking is finalized, is that it designs, it hits what it's intended to cover here. And we think we've got the intent laid out pretty well in the notice of proposed rulemaking, but obviously we want to see that come to fruition.
But Spencer said the proposal would go a long way toward fixing some of the problems that exist out there.
This is our opportunity to basically just make the case for basic fairness and address the issues where FMCSA so far has come up a little bit short in their proposal. Yes, it shouldn't be permissible for anyone to waive provisions of compliance with federal regulations. They're required. You can't just simply waive them. And there ought to be meaningful penalties for violations of these rules. Again, enforcement has to have some kind of a hammer. And if you're in this business, and I don't care what you do in trucking, if your business is not in compliance with the regulations, then you need to find another business to be in.
Spencer, Pugh, and Grimes took questions during Wednesday's fireside chat. They included questions about whether brokers could be held accountable for past transgressions under the new rule.
Yeah, it would. There's no way it would be retroactive. It would be effective with the date that the rulemaking goes into effect.
Another question that came in Wednesday was with regard to broker costs and the negotiation process up front. Spencer said that won't change under the proposed rule.
You're still going to negotiate every load that you haul. You're going to make the best deal you can. That's not going to change anyway. The only thing that's going to, and it doesn't mean that the broker or whoever you're talking to has to be truthful about any of the money that they're talking about. But once the record of the transaction becomes available, well, then you'll figure out real quick, did I get a decent deal or not? Or did this guy take advantage of me? And again, things will sort themselves out pretty fast, and truckers will figure out pretty quick who are the good guys, who they want to deal with, and those people will create relationships that will be ongoing, not just one here and one here and one here and one here, ongoing consistent relationships which works in everyone's best interest.
And in response to another question, Spencer said transparency leads to better outcomes for everyone involved in a broker-carrier agreement, including shippers and receivers.
Probably the simplest way that it helps all parties is that shippers have an interest in getting their goods moved from point A to point B. They don't make their sale until product gets delivered. And they're interested in a smooth, they're not interested in overpaying, but they are interested in having good, reliable delivery. And this proposal will foster more of these good, solid relationships that will end up providing better services to the shippers.
The last question of the night was an important one, and it was directed at OOIDA President Todd Spencer. If this proposal becomes a rule, will it actually make a difference?
Hell yes, it'll make a difference. We have, some of the brokers are just, they're apoplectic about this. And, and look, once this goes into effect, we've got a little time with it. Guys will sort out the good guys from the bad guys. The good brokers will get more dedicated truckers that will be working with them. And those that don't, truckers will figure out pretty quick who they don't want to do business with. And again, there are no losers there. Everybody's a winner.
FMCSA's comment period is open through January 21st. At last check, more than 2,000 comments had been submitted to the Federal Register, but the more, the better, Pugh said.
I think we can look at speed limiters to see how important comments are. The reason speed limiters, really nothing's happened on it, in our opinion, and I think it's true, is that there was almost 16,000 comments and pretty much all against. So nobody really wanted to touch that. So the more comments that we can get in on this, the better chances are to get a favorable answer to it, to maybe get some of the stuff in there like the enforcement and the penalties like Jay talked about. But, it's really easy, truckers. You're the experts, the men and women behind the wheel. You're the folks who deal with these things and have to deal with these brokers. So when you file these comments, tell about yourself. Tell about what's happened, how it affects you, and or whatever, because that's what they really need to see and hear.
As for commenting, the easiest way is to head on over to fightingfortruckers.com, click on Trucking Policy at the top of the page, and the first option is to demand broker transparency now. Click on that and follow the leads. But however you do it, Spencer said it's important you speak up before January 21st.
The broker transparency issue has been around for a long, long, long time. This is one of the requirements that actually has been in federal regulations for over 40 years. Over 40 years. It's just never been complied with. We need to change that. This is our opportunity to do it. But again, we can let everybody know what's going on, but our words mean so much more if they're backed up by your words and your real world experiences. Because again, you guys are the folks on the front line. Your voice matters. Your opinions matter. Let's work together and fix some of these issues. This is one that needs to be fixed.
For Landline Now, I'm Scott Thompson. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. Next, I'll get some insight into the OOIDA Fireside Chat and the transparency proposal itself from OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes, and Ashley Blackford talks mental health with therapist Buck Black. We'll be back in just a moment with more of the program. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At TruckStop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on TruckStop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Truckers have a rare opportunity right now, a chance to make significant progress regarding a topic that has many drivers red in the face and that's been a thorn in their side for years now, the issue of broker transparency. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Reddig. I'm joined, as always, by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Doing well, Mark. Great to be with you.
Well, great to have you with us. Let's start with something that happened earlier this week. OOIDA hosted what the association called a fireside chat. What essentially was that?
Yeah, it was basically kind of an informal discussion between myself, OOIDA President Todd Spencer, and OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh. The first half of I think it went about an hour long. We kind of went over some general comments on broker transparency, kind of the reason why we think it's an important issue and why we want this rulemaking to advance, and at some point to have a final rulemaking. We talked about what are the individual provisions that FMCSA laid out in their proposal that is currently going through the public comment period, and then we had an opportunity to take a whole bunch of different questions on varying aspects of the broker transparency proposal, how it would impact owner-operators. Again, I think really having an opportunity to educate the folks who are joining in live, and certainly we are going to send out the replay of the fireside chat for anyone who is not able to join, just so we can really get as much information out there as possible. We are closing in on the January 21st deadline to submit public comments, and it's really critical that we get as many individual comments submitted to the docket on this one as well. Looking earlier this morning, we are over 2,000 total, which is already a significant number, but we want to see that increase before the deadline, especially considering we've got a new Congress that started last week. On January 20th, we're going to have President Trump sworn in as new president, and certainly new leadership at DOT and FMCSA. And we want to make sure that they know that broker transparency is a priority for drivers. And the more comments they see on this, I think that's going to make clear that this is something that the new leadership needs to take seriously and needs to advance. And kind of one of the main reasons we think that is that it was under President Trump where this rulemaking first started back in the spring of 2020, when OOIDA submitted a petition to improve broker transparency. So we're hopeful that they can finish the job that they started back in the end of 2020, nearing the closing months of President Trump's first term.
Why is doing something like a fireside chat important when you're pursuing an issue like broker transparency?
Well, first of all, this is a complicated issue, and there's a whole lot of different details and nuance to the issue in general, but there's a whole lot of details in what FMCSA proposed. So we thought it was a good opportunity to kind of read through the regulatory language. I think it's about an 80-page proposal, really trying to break down what's going to be important for small business truckers, what they should comment on. And this is also an opportunity for us at OOIDA to hear directly from our members to kind of get a better idea and insight of what they have questions about, what they wanted to learn about. So I think it was really a productive conversation to help educate drivers and really convey the message on how important this rulemaking is, how important it is to submit comments before January 21st. So I think we're going to get that recording out here in the next couple days for anyone that was not able to join. And if you've got an opportunity, it's about an hour-long talk, and I think there's really some helpful discussion, helpful insights for anyone that would like to submit comments or would just like to learn more about the issue and about what FMCSA has proposed.
You mentioned, of course, that you and Louie and Todd went over kind of what the proposal is and the various aspects of it. You also mentioned the questions that you got from individual truck drivers. What were a couple of the more interesting questions that you heard?
Yeah, seeing who this broker transparency rule would apply to, who is going to be accessing the information. And I think FMCSA has laid that out pretty clear in their proposal. Brokers, shippers, and motor carriers is the intended target here. And FMCSA wants that because they believe that there is currently an asymmetry of information between the parties involved in a broker transaction. And kind of, reading through the proposal, FMCSA throughout the notice makes it clear that currently brokers have an unfair advantage given some of the vagueness of the current regulations that are on the books. I think kind of more importantly, these regulations aren't really complied with and certainly not enforced given the way they're structured. So I think it's clear that there's an intent for FMCSA to improve that process. And that's, I think, the main reasons why they've moved forward with this notice of proposed rulemaking. Another interesting question was, how is FMCSA going to enforce this? What's going to be the difference now over the last 3-4 decades that these regulations are on the books? And unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of direction on that from the proposal. And that is something we are going to be specifically commenting in the feedback that we provide FMCSA. We need a clearer plan on how FMCSA is going to hold unscrupulous brokers accountable on one hand. On the other hand, these provisions are designed to kind of create a more self-policing process among brokers, shippers, and carriers, which is, again, been the whole idea behind these broker transparency regulations going back decades, is to have a fair market, have the transparency where everyone knows the same information, and then any disputes can be worked out between the parties rather than going through expensive and inefficient legal proceedings, which unfortunately happens all too often, kind of given the current setup. So on one hand, we think there can be more self-policing if these proposals are finalized, strengthening the broker transparency regulations. On one hand, we're not trusting that, wholeheartedly. We do want to have some more oversight from FMCSA, from DOT when it comes to compliance and enforcement. And I don't think we got enough answers in the proposal. So we want to see some more direction, some more of a plan on that from FMCSA in a final rulemaking.
Yeah, we certainly saw the results of self-policing with the ELD mandate, where the ELD manufacturers are self-certifying their devices. And
right.
There have been many, many times that hasn't worked out so well.
Yeah, no question. Self-certification on ELDs was one of the main problems among a whole host of others on why we oppose that mandate. And here we are more than 5 or 6 years later now that the mandate has been in effect. We're still having this week, and it seems like a weekly occurrence where FMCSA announces a handful of ELDs need to be revoked from their approved list. So that continues to be a problem on the ELD side. I think there's a little more faith when it comes, if we've got the transparency in place where brokers are held accountable to provide the transaction information, that's going to be a whole lot, I think, better and preserving some free market economic forces when it comes to negotiating rates than the kind of the self-certification process. But we do have to have some more stronger teeth on the regulations too, to compel brokers to act in the way that they should be held to, given the regulatory requirements.
We've kind of talked about some of the points here, but before we go any further, I think it might be a good idea to kind of review the main points of the actual broker proposal. And this, of course, is a proposed rule by FMCSA. I know there are 4 main points that it covers. Can you kind of go over those?
Yeah, the first provision requires brokers to keep their records in an electronic format, and this would immediately end the loophole of brokers forcing motor carriers to visit their physical place of business to view a hard copy of transaction records. FMCSA acknowledges that is a common practice for brokers right now, and it really prevents motor carriers from being able to view transaction records. The second provision requires that records contain information about charges and payments connected to the shipment, including a description, amount, and dates, as well as any claims connected to the shipment. So it specifies the information that brokers must include. Third provision affirms that brokers have a regulatory obligation to provide transaction records. It really bolsters the specific regulatory language in 371.3c to make no doubt about it that this is a broker obligation to provide the transaction records to motor carriers or shippers that request them. When you kind of look through what's on the books now, depending on which side you're on here, you can kind of read it a couple different ways. But I think the proposed language really makes it clear that this is a regulatory obligation for brokers. And lastly, that the records be provided within a 48-hour period after a carrier makes a request. So really sets a defined period where motor carriers can receive the transaction information. We think the 48 hours is a sufficient and timely number if motor carriers want to access the information. So those are the four main provisions. Certainly a couple things that we petitioned for were not included in the proposal. One of those being the right for brokers to include waivers in contracts that would prohibit carriers from accessing transaction information. We don't think those waivers ought to be in any agreement, and really goes against the intent of broker transparency, really goes against the intent of this FMCSA proposal. So that's something we're going to continue to advocate for in our comments. And certainly the questions about compliance and enforcement, we'd like to get some more clarification on as well.
We've got about a minute and a half left here, Jay, and I did want to get to some of the basics here. How can people comment? Where can they go to make their comments on this proposal, and what is their deadline?
Yeah, the easiest way is fightingfortruckers.com. Our broker transparency page and our homepage has links where you can get to a form, submit your comments, and that'll go directly to the docket, regulations.gov. The docket number is FMCSA-2023-0257. We've also got a comment guide to assist you with your feedback up on fightingfortruckers.com. And we've got till January 21st is the final day to submit these comments. So a couple more weeks here. Really want to see those numbers keep going up because, again, the more FMCSA and DOT hear about this, I think it's going to make it a no-brainer for them to continue to prioritize this under the new leadership that's going to be taking over here soon as well.
Okay. Well, Jay, we're out of time, but fantastic information, and we certainly appreciate you sharing it with us.
Sure thing.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And folks, we will have direct links on our website, landlinenow.com. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit CapitalReman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
Landline Now, welcome back. A new year often means new resolutions for many. I recently spoke with therapist Buck Black about whether the new year is encouraging for people or daunting.
Well, it's interesting. It seems to be a little bit of each. I think it just depends on the personality. But there's plenty of people that they're really buying into New Year, new me, and they're really going with it. And for the people that it's motivating, then I say, that's great. Go with all the cliches. And put all the effort into it. For the people that's not feeling it, then, that's all right. It's don't give in to the pressure, all of the commercials that everybody needs to sign up for the gym and on and on and on. It's like, well, if you're not feeling it and you want to handle the new year on your own terms, that is just fine. And I'll tell you that there is research that shows that the majority of New Year's resolutions are broken by February. So if you're a person that's a little more cynical about the New Year's resolutions and all the pressure, think about it as in terms of lifestyle instead of all this pressure at the beginning of the year.
Yes, I have heard that statistic. So yeah, maybe not the best to do a resolution because you could be setting yourself up, I guess. What recommendations do you have for people who do want to make a change? Maybe they're not calling it a resolution, but want to, do something different. What's your recommendation there?
Well, for the people that do want to make a change, then I would say, well, congratulations. So continue to go with that momentum. And in regards to the idea of it's a lifestyle, it's a longer term situation, get into that long term thinking and realize that it takes quite a while to build a habit. And it's popularly said that, well, it depends who you ask, but it takes 21 days to form a habit, 28 days to form a habit, something like that. The idea is it takes a while. So pace yourself and get into the idea of, I'm doing this for the long term. And when you're working in that mindset, plenty of times, if you tell other people, hey, this is what I'm going to do, these are my goals, then it helps you to be held more accountable. And it's just the idea of telling people that you want to do these things, not necessarily if those other people follow up. So, I mean, those are some easier things that tends to help people.
Now, this time of year, I'm curious, do you see, when, I guess, does seasonal depression kind of peak?
Well, Ashley, I'm glad that you asked about that because that is something that we have to pay attention to, because when people have their seasonal depression, then it's a lot harder to get into the motivation to make life better or anything like that. So seasonal depression in the northern hemisphere, so all of us here, runs from October 1st until April 1st. Oh, wow. It's because the amount of daylight is less during those months. Even if you were to live in the Sun Belt and have, plenty of warm weather, you still have less daylight. So if we look at, there's less daylight December 21st every year, so that's the least amount of daylight. But seasonal depression usually gets even worse in January and February, and then after that, people start to come out of it because typically you're dealing with after the holidays and maybe some fallout from that, and typically cold weather for most of the people, and you just kind of have a combination of everything. And on the news, they often talk about the most depressing day of the year being in mid-January because that's when all the credit card bills are due, and the holiday season is over, and it's the coldest and all of that.
And is it fair to say, people who deal with depression year-round, is it worse this time of year?
For the majority of people, it is worse during the winter months, but that would be on average. For some people with depression, the middle of the summer is the hardest time for them. So if someone has depression and winter isn't that bad for them, and they say, no, it's the warmer weather that's bad for me, that definitely happens. But in general, most of us get depressed, even in the wintertime.
What advice do you have for people, especially our listeners who are truck drivers out on the road who may be feeling depressed or maybe they're not sure? What advice do you have for them?
Well, I think that part of it is looking at what is it that's making you depressed. So is it just simply the lack of daylight? Is it the cold weather? Is it relationship issues? So picking it apart and figuring out what's going on. So some people do a timeline of their depression, especially if it occurs the same time every year. These are typically the events that make me feel this way. Or some people just kind of write in general, either a list or in paragraph format of, these are my feelings, this is what I'm dealing with. So get an idea of what is causing the depression. So once you've figured that out, there's a few things that you can do. So I know that there's always discussion of exercise. Well, if you increase the amount of movement that you get, that is the best natural antidepressant out there. So if you get out of your truck, you walk around, make a few laps around your truck once or twice a day, increase your movement somehow, some way, that would be an ideal thing to do. Another thing to do is limit your news. Don't overdo it. It's important to know about what's going on in the world, but people who listen to the news nonstop, they often get more depressed. That can make life even harder, as well as work on your positive thinking. So a lot of people get really negative, so find things to be grateful for, maybe listen to some comedy as you drive, watch some funny movies, things like that. That's something that can help. And the last thing that I'll mention that a lot of people don't know about is that you can get a SAD light, SAD light. And that stands for Seasonal Affective Disorder Light Therapy. And if you Google it, you'll find all the directions. You expose yourself to the light for about 30 minutes per day in the morning, and you can read by the light, but don't stare into it. And that is something that there's research that shows that helps people to feel better because they get more light. So the only real big caveat to that is if a person has bipolar disorder, the SAD light is not good for them because it can throw them into a manic episode. So outside of that, the SAD light is helpful for people in general.
It's interesting that what you mentioned before about, watching the news and taking in that. I have seen some posts, because of course true crime is a big deal. A lot of people listen to podcasts and whatnot. But that can, I assume, cause some anxiety. I know, true crime of some horrific things, obviously, but do you encourage people, obviously, or have you seen that, that can heighten anxiety when you're constantly taking in the bad news?
Yeah. And I find true crime to be interesting myself. And I think everything in its proper dose. I like to eat donuts and ice cream, but I probably shouldn't make that the main part of my diet. So that's the way that I look at it. And you know what? When you expose yourself to that negativity and so on, pair it with some comedic relief later. Just kind of balance it out.
I'm curious, what are some of the common mental health issues have you seen that truck drivers often face?
Well, it definitely is the depression that we talked about. That would be a big one. Anxiety is a big one as well. And really for the general population, anxiety would be the number one psychological concern of just people in general. And if we look specifically at truck drivers with their anxiety, well, this time of year, a lot of truck drivers are driving in the snow and dealing with the problems that cold weather causes. So that increases anxiety tremendously. So that would definitely be something that would be trucking related, and financial anxiety, that is another big one. So I think those are really common, and with truck drivers, the anxiety regarding all the regulations and taking care of what you need to take care of. And the last thing that I'll say on that topic is a different type of anxiety that people don't think about so much is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is a very specific type of anxiety because you've been exposed to a trauma. And when it comes to truck drivers, plenty of times it's being exposed to crashes, whether it's you're personally in the crash or you see the damage that has been done due to crashes, possibly lives being lost or people being hurt severely. So truck drivers are much more likely to have the PTSD type of anxiety due to their work and just everything they're exposed to.
What advice do you have for drivers who are on the road and maybe they feel that anxiety, they feel depressed, but they're like, I don't have time to make an appointment with my doctor or get therapy? What do you say to them?
Reach out to your friends, to your family. Talk with anybody that you feel comfortable talking with. That would be the best thing that you can do. I don't want people to overdo social media. Sometimes that increases anxiety. But if you use social media appropriately, there's all kinds of Facebook groups that drivers can join, and they can talk back and forth and just share how they're feeling and what's going on. So talking to someone in some fashion is typically the most helpful. And if you just want to keep it all to yourself, then it goes back to if you do some journaling and you write, just make a list of what you're feeling. Just make a list of what's going on in your head. That can actually help to take it out of your head and put it on paper. So that's definitely a direction that I would point drivers.
And, if they do want to seek counseling and therapy, obviously we've come a long ways with technology, and that can be done, over Zoom or over the phone, right?
Absolutely. So it goes back to what the client is comfortable with. That in the old days we only had the phone, and I did phone therapy with people for years, and then when the technology got good enough, around the pandemic especially, then video is even better and a lot more available. So the only people that I see that really have difficulty with the video sessions are the people that are not comfortable with the technology. Mm-hmm. Video makes the interactions better. Video makes therapy better. But if a person is more comfortable with the phone, then hey, that's okay. And some drivers, they see their therapist once a month, once every 6 months in the office because that's what's comfortable for them, or they do a hybrid with their therapist. So there's a variety of possibilities out there.
All right. Well, Buck, thank you so much.
All right. I appreciate it, Ashley.
That was therapist Buck Black. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Running on ultra-low sulfur diesel? Stay protected this winter with Howe's Diesel Treat and Diesel Lifeline. Steer clear of gel and ice with North America's #1 trusted brand. Find Howe's products nationwide at select retailers, auto parts stores, truck stops, and on Amazon.com.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide.
Vendor choice. Owner-operators rejoice.
Truckdown.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back. The state of Missouri is taking another crack at predatory towing practices, and while there's been an appetite for reforms in the past, the governor at the time wasn't biting. It's a new day, however, in the Show Me State, and Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine joins us now with details. Keith, good to see you.
Scott, good to see you. How's it going?
Doing just fine. Happy New Year.
Yeah, sure.
Still.
Yeah,
why not?
I mean, it's January.
Yeah, there you go. Before we get into the latest here in Missouri, let's look back into the not-so-distant past at what Missouri has tried to do with regard to predatory towing practices and the obstacles that popped up in the process.
Do we need that, what is that music that you might hear on TV where they're going back in time, that little, transitionary
Sure,
music?
yeah, we'll throw that in there. Why not?
Should we have that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Towing reform is definitely, it's been a constant pursuit in the state of Missouri. We've seen more and more states here in recent years actually get changes made to improve things for, of course, our focus being on truck drivers. And we've seen that happen. We've seen in Missouri here in recent years with Governor Parson in the executive suite different ways of going about, having some sort of towing reform, whether it is regulating towing rates, putting in place a towing rotation rules, and it's we've seen efforts to create a task force that their responsibility would be to address concerns about non-consensual towing. And in multiple occasions, bills have actually gotten through the state legislature. And worth pointing out, I mean, they've gotten through overwhelmingly through both the House and the Senate in Missouri, only to be vetoed by Governor Parson, citing reasons like maybe provisions that the legislature was trying to approve could be legally problematic, or in the case with creating a task force to address concerns about non-consensual towing, is that the governor believed that there were adequate protections currently in place that didn't necessitate having changes made. So, OOIDA definitely has been active there at the State House trying to get something through, but only to be rejected by the governor. Fortunately, at least with this particular issue, there is a new governor coming in here in mid-January that has been described as being friendly on the issue of towing reform. So, very hopeful that that this year will be the turning point. And do you go big on this and try to get everything done in one bill?
Yeah.
I've seen the legislation that has been offered up here in Missouri. There's a House and Senate version of this. They are identical, and they would get a lot done. So, we will see what happens.
Well, so with the new bills here, and again, I think there's optimism that something will be done, and it's encouraging, I think, that it's been introduced so early on in this legislative session. Mm-hmm. This new bill, as it's in the House and Senate in the same form, what exactly would it be looking to do?
Yeah, well, again, there's a number of provisions on here. Among them, making the Missouri DOT responsible for establishing procedures for non-consensual towing. Of course, the focus is going to be on commercial vehicles that are being removed from roadways. Also putting in place procedures for complaint filing, a process for that, a process for adjudication, a requirement that there is certain information that must be included on every invoice for a non-consensual tow. What is that certain information? It's not spelled out in the legislation, but the legislation does require the establishment of a towing and recovery review board. This board would consist of 7 members. The legislation does specify like who would appoint, what they would represent, where they would be from, that sort of thing. One of the 7 members of this review board that would be established if this legislation is signed into law would include a representative of independent owner-operators. So a definite nod there to, the pursuit of the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. So that's encouraging. There's another provision that would allow an operator or an owner of a commercial vehicle to request a specific towing company, and for the most part, law enforcement would be required to fulfill that request. I mean, there could be some situations like distance that might necessitate having to override that,
Sure.
but generally, allowing the operator, the owner of the truck to have their preferred towing company do the tow. So a lot of provisions in there. I mean, I've gone over quite, a lot of them, but
Sure.
there are others in there. We will see what happens here over the next few months with this legislation. But if we're looking at track record for the legislature there in Missouri, I mean, they have been willing to enact reforms. Hopefully, the roadblock has been removed with the new governor coming in.
Yeah, it's a comprehensive bill here, and as you mentioned there, OOIDA is supporting it and kind of leading the charge there, or here, I guess, in Missouri. And if you are a Missouri-based member or a Missouri-based truck driver, certainly do reach out to your state rep and make sure that they get on board with this, because the more support that there is in Jefferson City for this, the chances are higher, obviously, for it being signed into law. Keith, before we let you go, I want to talk about one more thing, and we're going to switch to Massachusetts here, where the legislature has approved changes to a rule that really does impact truckers in the state quite a bit. What can you tell us about this one?
Yeah, this goes back to August of last year when the Massachusetts, the Registry of Motor Vehicles, they communicated to like 500 commercial drivers there in the state that at the end of August they would lose their CDLs, and the reasoning for that is because over almost 20 years ago and later, if they had committed an offense while they were operating their personal vehicle. So differing from what the federal rules are, which puts the look-back period to the end of September of 2005, Massachusetts didn't have that stopping point. So definitely there was a lot of concern there in Massachusetts. Initially, the Registry of Motor Vehicles implemented a hearing that you could request a hearing up through like the 1st of January if you wanted to challenge that, and in the meantime, a commercial driver could continue to drive. In the meantime, since last August, the governor there in Massachusetts got behind getting legislation passed that would put in place that cap on the look-back period as the same as the Fed. So that really got going through the State House there in Massachusetts about middle of December, and they got it done here on the first of the year. So there is no longer that risk in Massachusetts of neighborhood of 500 commercial drivers losing their privileges of driving truck due to certain offenses that occurred 20 plus years ago while they were driving a personal vehicle.
So in short, this issue is fixed now? Is it done and signed, sealed, and delivered?
Yes,
okay.
it is fixed. Of course, the governor was behind it. Once it got to her desk, she signed it. And I think it was like maybe as of January 2nd was when that became finalized.
Yeah, that's a sigh of relief for those, what, you said about 500 commercial drivers that were affected there. And an example of government working for us, I guess, after kind of messing stuff up there. But
after scaring the crap out of about 500 people, yes.
Hey, they cleaned up the kitchen after the mess, I guess. So, hey, we'll give them half credit on this one. Keith, we'll give you full credit, as always, for stopping by and keeping us updated on all these stories. We'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine, and that's our show for today. Thanks for listening wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We're back tomorrow with another show, and we hope to see you then.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing.
My kids.
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.